Good morning, mademoiselles and messieurs. Mystery Man 64 at your service, and welcome to my review for Pikmin. As usual, spoilers are to be expected. You should watch my full Let's Play or playthrough first for context, as well as getting an idea of what the game is like. As well as just giving my playthrough some love, of course. Pikmin is a game and series that I do, in fact, enjoy, despite what may seem in my playthrough, but that is what the review is for. And without further ado, let's get on with my review for Pikmin. Our journey begins with an intrepid space explorer by the name of Captain Olimar, which, for those who do not know, is a play on how certain syllables are said in Japanese if you say it like o-ri-ma, and then if you say it in reverse, ma-ri-o. O-ri-ma, Mario. Olimar is opposite Mario in that speak. It's fun. It's just a random tangent. But exploring through space with his trusty spaceship, the Dolphin, until suddenly, the greatest enemy known to mankind, a slowly moving space rock, hits his ship and crash lands onto a mysterious planet, which is now known as, in Pikmin 3, as PNF 404, but in 1 or 2, it's more or less just called Pikmin Planet, and so I will just refer to it as so. With wrecked ship in tow and only 30 days of life support, you have very little odds of survival. With nothing but a spark of hope and determination full of grit, the game officially starts. You start the game on your first day in the fittingly named crash site, with a zoomed-in camera, not really knowing exactly where you are, thus the confusion of you landing on an unknown planet in the middle of nowhere. You have no idea what you are, dazed and confused. So it's very fitting, until you stumble upon a mysterious little red pod that sprouts a singular seed. The game will prompt you in the voice or notes of Captain Olimar that periodically appear throughout the game of how to move, how to change the camera, the angle, zoom in, zoom out, and a rough idea as to what you should do next on your first day. Luckily, you have all the time in the world, and there are no harmful entities on your first day, so you can take your time and adjust to the game's control scheme and the mechanic that are the Pikmin. You start out with only one type, that being the red Pikmin, and they tend to be the most useful, but you can pick them, obviously, from the ground, and you can throw them at things, you can dismiss them, and you can swarm them around with the C-stick, or if you're on a Wii, down on the D-pad. I will go into a bit more on version differences later. It is important. You continue to raise Pikmin until you find your first missing ship part, and luckily enough, it also happens to be the most important. How convenient. Your ship's engine, which will allow the Dolphin to take small flight and explore further areas. Once it has been taken back to the ship, the game, or Olimar, tells you there are a total of 30 ship parts, and there are 29 parts remaining, and that you also happen to have only 30 days remaining until your life support fails, and you're left on the planet. Real dark for a Nintendo game, I know. After that, the real game begins, with the only other place you are able to go to being the aptly named Forest of Hope. Once you start your second day, you get a day-night timer, so you only have so much time to do something on any given day from here on out. Since Pikmin only has a few areas to select from, I decided to also give each area a rundown in order of when you unlock them. You know, unlike Kirby or CTR, although it has racetracks, there are so many, and going more in depth with them isn't that worth it. And here it's much more manageable. So if there are areas or levels that I feel like I should go over, and that shouldn't take too long, I might. So we, of course, go first with the impact site. On your first day, you're given the whole tutorial spiel and given your first Pikmin type to use of red Pikmin. Reds are immune to fire, but are also the best fighters of all the Pikmin. They apparently have an increased amount of damage that they do to enemies by, I believe, 50%. So now you know. And I believe you learn them through various logs that Olimar can give as an end of day report, or you just learn that through the game. I'm not sure which. On the first day, you have unlimited time to get the engine, and there's only one other part there, but requires the other two Pikmin types found in the later areas of the Forest of Hope and the Forest Navel, so you won't be able to get it until much later. In fact, it's recommended to get it later, because starting on, I believe, day 7, after the crash site changes, giving you some 10s pellets and 20 pellets of each color upon return. Depending whether you arrive even number day or odd, you can also encounter 2 optional bosses. But that pretty much wraps up the crash site. On to the next area. The Forest of Hope is where the game truly begins. You are given a set amount of time to work with for each day on day 200, making your already limited time come into play. You were given roughly 15 minutes to explore an area before night falls, and when that happens, the creatures of the night awaken and start looking for food, and you're on the menu. So, you leave the surface for safety in hopes of a better tomorrow. The area at first is bright and does not have many threatening creatures. There are some things of importance, though. First, in order to explore new areas, you need a certain number of ship parts. And one of the most important of which that happen to land in the area is the ship's radar, allowing you to locate further parts in an area by making the ship parts symbols stars that you can view up on your map. The second most important thing here is the yellow onion, as they are called, and by extension, yellow Pikmin. In the Pikmin hierarchy, yellows are probably the least valuable. In the first game, anyway. Their features include being able to be thrown higher than any of the 3, but most and or least helpful, depending on your persuasion, is they are the only type that can carry bomb rocks, which, if you do not know, are probably the thing I hate the most about this game. More on that later. There are bomb rocks near the yellow onion and are obvious enough that you'll probably swarm yellow on it, and from there, Olimar will tell you only yellows carry bomb rocks. And from there, also near the yellow onion, are 2 walls that look slightly different from the one you break down in the beginning of the area. These walls are much more solid, so only bomb rocks can break them. There is also water in this stage, and neither yellow nor reds can go in water, so you would be right to think to come back later with the third Pikmin type. The last important thing to note are the boss type creatures in the area, being the armored cannon beetle and burrowing snagrat. My advice when it comes to areas that look like it contains a boss or a creature that looks menacing or out of the ordinary, to scout with Olimar first to see what it does, or pick a small squad so there won't be any major losses. Granted, you can't fight them until you have the last of the Pikmin, but it is something to bring up since I'm going over the area, regardless. Finally, after the day is nearing its end, Olimar will prompt the player by saying, there are Pikmin that are not near their onions or in Olimar's party. They will be left behind and quite literally be fed to the wolves. If any are left behind as the day ends and you leave the surface, you will see what Pikmin were left behind as they are eaten by the planet's nocturnal creatures. And those losses will be recorded at the end of day report, which gives a synopsis and a timeline of how many Pikmin were raised, how many fell in battle, and those that were left behind. And we salute those brave soldiers. It can weirdly get to you until you remember that A, this is a game, 1, possibly meant for children, B, you can always raise more Pikmin than you lose, and C, it's Pikmin. Why does it need to be so serious? It's so strange that it can get so real, and yet the premise is so ridiculous. Anyway, that's the Forest of Hope. The Forest Navel is, in my opinion, probably the worst area in the game. The area itself is dark, and the music of the area is also not the greatest. I forgot to mention that each area has its own theme music that plays in the background. The level also has fairly annoying enemies and a decent amount of water, but luckily fairly close to your base is the blue onion that happens to be in water and immediately tells you that blue Pikmin can go into water, thus completing the Triforce of red, blue, and yellow primary colors. Oh, good burping. Thank you. There are a lot of walls that have to be bombed to make getting back to your ship easier, and thus arise one of the biggest problems I encountered, but I'll get to that later. The red bug can be annoying get if you don't know how it works, and the puff stool can turn your Pikmin against you, and the beady long legs dropping from above can get a lot of Pikmin if you don't know about it. The area is also prone to many glitches, like Pikmin disappearing under bridges or getting pushed through the floor. It's just not a fun area. But it is the first area to use puzzles that require all Pikmin types to get parts, so I'll give it that, but no more. The distant spring is the prettiest area in the game and contains a lot of water hazards, so blues are the primary in this stage. There are some annoying enemies here too, but being the second to last or the last actual area to collect a ton of parts, depending on your persuasion, I can give it a pass. But the most annoying are the swooping snake spuds and puffy blowhog. They may be harmless to Pikmin, but they do disrupt them by throwing them all around and can grab or blow them into bigger threats, i.e. the spotty bulbiters. You would think I'd find the spotty bulbiters more of a problem, but not so. You deal with them in the same way as the normal ones. Get a group of 40 plus reds or a large group of Pikmin and swarm them from behind, and they can be dealt with pretty efficiently. After a certain part, or time, Olimar will mention that not all parts are necessary. There are exactly 5 optional parts, but it can be hard to tell what is required and what isn't. Sometimes Olimar will tell you if the part isn't necessary if you press A near it, but the most obvious is at the end, where the names of the parts will be either yellow or blue, and the 5 optional parts are in blue. The only other thing of major importance is the optional boss of the area, the Smoky Prog. It is technically a poison type enemy that leaves a trail of poison closely behind it, and it can fell many Pikmin in an instant. It will go directly to your base and go under one of the onions and roar. That roar will uproot any Pikmin in the ground, and if any are under the prog, they are donezo. It is great. A golden pearl that can raise 100 total Pikmin, and since I've forgotten till now, is the maximum number you can have in the field at any given moment. And the catch being you can only fight the prog on day 15 or before, or the egg that would be there normally is gone. Once fought, it cannot be fought again unless you reset the day or start a new file. Lastly, the final trial. The last area in the game, and requires 29 out of 30 parts to get to, and once locked, a meteor shower will occur for but a moment. But it is really cool to see for those few moments. This area contains the final boss in the game, but the path to get it requires every single Pikmin type, even bomb rocks. In fact, you need bomb rocks to defeat the boss, which in of itself is kind of cool. But the way they expect you to use bomb rocks is very unintuitive. This is what will go down. When the boss is salivating, it will slurp up nearby Pikmin, and one of 2 things will happen with bomb rocks. 1, the boss will eat the dropped bomb rock or Pikmin carrying a bomb, and it will explode in its mouth, stunning him for a short time, allowing you to throw Pikmin at it until they're shaken off. 2, you throw the yellow carrying the bomb rock towards the boss when he slurps and tosses the bomb into his mouth, causing the boss's tongue to slap it in the face, stunning it longer. In my playthrough, I could not get the latter to work, even when I knew about it. Most of the time, I could only get the former. I'm sure there's a trick to it, but if I need a trick for a built-in mechanic, something is flawed. And why did it have to be bomb rocks? The single most unreliable tool in the game. At least during my time. Maybe the GameCube version, because I honestly don't recall this being a problem when I first played the series on Wii. I know they tweaked some things and added some quality of life features, and that makes sense for a remake, so I guess they knew of some problems and fixed a few. Maybe it was the first of its kind and it wasn't a perfected art yet, but a problem no less. Now, I am a big fan of RTSs, or real-time strategies, and Pikmin is a very solid RTS. Plenty of micromanaging, and trying to collect as many parts as you can in a day is very satisfying. The different Pikmin types, though basic, are fun to use in puzzles, and they are the cutest little flower things. And you get attached to the little guys. I enjoy the level design. Aside from the Forest Navel, every other level is really good. The game also allows you to rewind or continue from last save and redo in case you had massive losses that day or just missed out on a part. You can load before the day began and try again, so the game is very forgiving. I really like how there are timed or day-specific events, like the crash site after day 7, getting tons of pellets to raise Pikmin in either the Gulix or Mamuta if the day is even, and the Smoky Prog before day 15 really tests one ability if you want to see everything. There are plenty more that probably I don't know of. As for the things I didn't like, the AI for the Pikmin can, for lack of a better term, be very dumb at times, if not infuriating to deal with. Some of the things they do automatically near a patch of grass, they will pull it without you ordering to do so. See some rocks to break, they will do so. Sometimes they will trip for no reason, and even flowered Pikmin will do this for seemingly no reason. The camera is also not the greatest to use, only being able to rotate by facing a certain direction with all arm pressing the trigger. There's just no easy camera control in this game. And in the GameCube version, there's not a way to cycle through your Pikmin. You can cycle them in the Wii version, but you have to either dismiss into groups or sift around for the one you want to use, and holding on by pressing A onto that Pikmin type will prioritize that type of Pikmin. It's not the best way to go about it, especially if you have bomb Pikmin. Speaking of, bomb rocks are the worst thing in all of existence. You wanna know why? Well, it all started when I first tried to record a Forest Navel. I knew of an area where you can get bomb rocks pretty close to your base. Right? And there is a stick they can build to get back up onto them. So, after going around an area and getting back to them, I thought, well, I'll just whistle them. What could go wrong? Then the bombs drop. I freeze in confusion and lose all of my yellows and half of my health. I reset. I thought, that's weird. I recall being able to whistle bomb rocks. So, logically, I tried again. And sure enough, it happened again. 3 resets later, and I taught myself never whistle bomb rocks under any circumstance. And only until later did I get the log that tells me that you in fact cannot whistle bomb rocks and they will drop them. I would have liked that several days ago. Thanks, game. But that was the worst it got, thankfully. And now I have passed that information and knowledge on to you all, so you don't make the same mistakes that I did. In case you're wondering, no, I did not keep those videos. I'm sorry. It would have made a great failure reel, but hindsight. Pikmin. Would I still recommend it? Well, it depends. Yes, because despite the game's shortcomings, I still enjoy it, and the rest of the series for that matter. It's definitely more complex than your average Nintendo game. You should still give it a chance. The series, similar to Metroid, kind of needs it, and it does get better, like way better. As for the no, mayhaps not this version is the ideal version. The Wii version might be better tailored for a more enjoyable experience. But if GameCube is all you got, it will be rough around the edges and might not be your cup of tea. But if you give it a chance, it could still surprise you, and thanks to this information, you might have a better time than I did. And even then, I still enjoyed the game. But the formula and gameplay is much more niche than that of, say, Mario or Kirby, so as much as I would like to recommend this to anybody, I don't think I can. I'd say if you enjoy RTSs or puzzle games and micromanaging, then this game is right up your alley. Otherwise, I'd say Try it if it interests you, and if you don't like it, it's probably not for you. If you want a good Pikmin impression, I would say start with 3 or 3 Deluxe, as it is probably much easier to obtain, play, and ultimately enjoy. This review was a little bit different than the others, and I hope you enjoyed it. What do you think? Do you think I have sound arguments? Have I convinced others to try it? What is your favorite Pikmin? And steer clear of stray bomb rocks. And until then.